Tonight on the Night Team. He's guilty.
Are you surprised by the verdict?
They did the right thing.
Former LMPD detective Brett Hankison became the first person convicted in the botched raid that killed Breonna Taylor in 2020.
It's not a perfect verdict, but it is something, and it gets that family closer to closure. It gets Louisville closer to closure.
Tonight, we're hearing reaction from leaders of the social justice movement. And then...
And we are going to win this governor's race in Indiana this year!
A rare sight, a Kentucky governor crossing the bridge to stump for a candidate in Indiana. We're on the campaign trail ahead on the Night Team. The shocking verdict: former LMPD officer Brett Hankison found guilty in a split verdict late last night. It's our top story right here on the Night Team. I'm Alex Dederer. Hankison was found guilty of depriving Breonna Taylor of her constitutional rights during a botched LMPD raid back in March of 2020. A federal jury handed down the verdict after a 3-week trial. It's a decision Breonna Taylor's mother has been waiting years for.
I'm grateful to God. It took a lot of patience. It took a lot of time, 1,694 days. I started to feel defeated. It's been a hard thing to trust in the system the whole time anyway. And as the later it got, the harder it got. And I'm just glad to be on the other side.
A split verdict. That same jury finding Hankison not guilty of violating the civil rights of Taylor's 3 neighbors, their apartments getting caught in the gunfire. Still, Hankison will spend time behind bars. LMPD responded late this afternoon on social media to the verdict, saying in part, quote, "It is not lost on us that this event forever altered the fabric of our community, and we acknowledge the pain caused by the death of Breonna Taylor." The department goes on to say, "We as an agency strive to continuously improve. Since the events of 2020, LMPD has evolved and made significant improvements to our training, practices, and policies," end quote. All new right here on the Night Team, WHAS11's Alexandra Goldberg and photojournalist Aspen Hester spoke with civil rights leaders today in Louisville about the verdict.
This is a case that we all saw it. We knew what happened, and it felt like we just were not going to get any sort of justice, and we have.
Late Friday night, former LMPD officer Brett Hankison was found guilty of violating Breonna Taylor's civil rights in the 2020 botched house raid. Hours before the verdict came down, the jury found Hankison not guilty of violating civil rights of 3 neighbors. Their homes also caught in gunfire.
No, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect verdict. But it is something, and it gets that family closer to closure. It gets Louisville closer to closure.
Sadiqa Reynolds has been a longtime civil rights leader in Louisville.
It is an America that says this is unacceptable. We won't tolerate this kind of behavior. We don't want people to be terrorized in their beds, in their homes.
This is the door former LMPD officer Brett Hankison walked through after a 12-person jury convicted him. Guilty was the verdict that left Tamika Palmer, Breonna Taylor's mother, emotional right here outside the courthouse.
Time, 1,694 days. It took. It was long, it was hard, I don't even know if I got some words, but thank God.
I'm not gonna lie, I was very unnerved. I was just grateful that there was some solace for the Breonna Taylor family because they need that, steadfast and fighting.
Chanel Helm of Black Lives Matter says still, Taylor's 3 neighbors await their justice.
It's also really ridiculous that folks who are put in harm's way are still not receiving justice as well.
She says by the time a case gets to the courts, it's too late for accountability.
And what we've been seeing from LMPD post-2020 is that they think the court system is going to solve their problems, but they still have to deal with us every day.
Now, activists are waiting for his sentencing in March, where he could face life in prison. In Louisville, Alexandra Goldberg, WHAS11 Night Team, on your side.
Former Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher, who was mayor when the raid happened, sent us a statement on the verdict. He says in part, quote, "Last night's verdict can never erase the pain of Breonna's family and loved ones. I know the time this has taken was difficult for our entire city, but it was critical for the justice system to do its work and find accountability." Current Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg responded on social media today, saying in part, quote, "I'm hopeful this verdict brings some peace to the family of Breonna Taylor and our entire community. We still have work ahead, but progress is being made every day to improve public trust and unite our city," end quote. Now, the city is still negotiating with the U.S. Department of Justice on the federal consent decree to oversee LMPD. Hankison will be sentenced in March. Now, again, it's important to note that this was a split verdict. Hankison was acquitted on count 2, which involves Taylor's neighbors when Hankison's bullets flew into their home. When Hankison is sentenced in March, it's completely at federal judge Rebecca Grady Jennings' discretion how much time he will serve. He could face a maximum time of life in prison. However, legal experts we have spoken with tell us it is unlikely he will be given the maximum sentence. Well, rare and seemingly unheard of, Kentucky's governor crossing the river to stump for an Indiana governor candidate. Andy Beshear is hoping to use some of the national attention he's garnered this election cycle to drive voters to the polls.
And I need your help in electing your next governor of Indiana, Jennifer McCormick.
Just days out from the election, a drive across the bridge and a plea from Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear in Indiana.
She ended up changing parties because of her principles, but she is the type of middle-of-the-road candidate that is perfect to lead Indiana and support all families there.
Beshear spent the morning at a rally held by Indiana Democrats, stumping for Jennifer McCormick, the Democratic candidate for Indiana governor.
It'll be good to get our voice back for everyone in the 92 counties and make sure that everybody feels included. Southern Indiana is a huge, important part of our economy, and we've got great people here to make sure we run Indiana the way we want that done.
McCormick is a former Republican superintendent turned Democrat and is facing current Republican Senator Mike Braun and Libertarian Donald Rainwater. A week earlier, the Indiana Republican Party hosted their own Get Out the Vote rally at the same park in Jeffersonville.
The biggest thing that separates me from my opponent is her experience of never signing the front side of a paycheck, wanting to run a business with 32,000 employees, 80 agencies, 30 major ones.
Longtime Republican Mayor of Jeffersonville Mike Moore told us today everyone's vote is important.
We've got two good choices. Is it the economy? Is it education? Is it, your civil rights? Whatever it is that draws you to that election, make sure you get out and vote, because somebody else is going to be speaking for you if you don't. Get out and vote. A message being spread across party lines from Indiana to Kentucky.
This is the bedrock of our democracy. We are the greatest country in the history of the world because of our ability to vote, to peacefully transition power. This is our chance to make our voice heard and select our leaders for the years to come. So everybody, get out there and vote.
Here in Kentucky, early voting numbers have been shattering expectations. Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams says nearly 500,000 Kentuckians cast their votes on the first 2 days of no-excuse early voting. Michael Adams also gave us a little bit of a glimpse at who was heading out to the polls early. He says more than 50% of voters were registered Republican, while just over 40% are registered Democrats. Early voting in Kentucky officially wrapped up today, but you can still vote Tuesday. And TARC doesn't want a lack of transportation to keep you from the polls. That's why it says all routes will be fare-free all day on Election Day. This applies to all rides, whether it's to your nearest polling place or any other location. TARC 3 paratransit rides will be free as well. The polls are open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesday, and a quick reminder that if you're in line by 6 p.m., you are still allowed to vote. And with just 3 days until Election Day, the presidential candidates are staging campaign blitzes across some key swing states in the final weekend of campaigning. Vice President Harris and former President Trump both visited North Carolina today, where polls show an extremely close race. Here's ABC's Chuck Sievertson with the latest.
With many polls showing an extremely tight race, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are focusing in on some key battleground states, including North Carolina. Harris speaking to a crowd of about 10,000.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. We're done with that.
North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper at the event, taking aim at Trump.
He is a danger to our democracy and our Constitution, and he should never be president again.
Former President Donald Trump also in the Tar Heel State Saturday with 4 campaign events planned through Monday. His plane and Air Force Two, the vice presidents, at one point sitting next to each other on the tarmac in Charlotte. Trump won North Carolina in 2020 by about 75,000 votes. Polls show this race is another dead heat. The former president holding a rally in Gastonia Saturday afternoon before heading to Greensboro.
But now the fate of our nation is really in your hands. This is a very important state. We can't take a chance of losing the great state of North Carolina.
His running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, visiting 2 battleground states in the Southwest, holding rallies in Las Vegas and Phoenix.
I want you to get yourself to the polls. I want you to take 9 of your friends and family so that we can take this country back.
Meanwhile, Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz, also in Nevada and Arizona this weekend as part of a 7-state campaign swing.
I kind of have a feeling that women all across this country, from every walk of life, from either party, are going to send a loud and clear message to Donald Trump next Tuesday, November 5th, whether he likes it or not.
This hard-fought election is fueling massive voter turnout. As of Saturday afternoon, more than 73 million Americans have already cast their vote, and millions more will head to the polls this Tuesday. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News, New York.
We will be on air all night on election night for live special coverage starting at 7. We'll be streaming on WHAS 11 Plus and the WHAS 11 YouTube channel. Then at 11, the WHAS 11 night team will have a complete wrap-up of local races and results with team coverage and insights from political experts.